What's up, you guys? Welcome to the Therapy Brothers podcast. I'm Brandon.
I'm Tyler. We're brothers.
We're therapists,
We're not afraid of your questions.
so bring it. Welcome to Therapy Welcome to the Therapy Brothers podcast. We're so glad to have you here. We've really appreciated some of the responses that we've been getting from you since we've started doing this. Really excited about what we've got going on today. Got another great question from someone who is all the way across the world and meeting with us at 3:00 a.m. their time. So appreciate the willingness to be on here. Before we get into the question and the discussion today, just wanted to read a review. This one comes from Wudgie17. It says, really good stuff. I appreciate the range of topics Brandon takes on and how he discusses them in a way that's understandable, relatable. He is willing to dig deep on tough topics and provide insight with practical solutions for real problems. So
Wow.
Thank you, Wudgie, and a little bit of love for you, Brandon.
Yeah, thanks, Wudgie. Jeez, I like that name too, Wudgie.
That's an awesome name. So glad you're with us, Wudgie. Thank you for your willingness to reach out and share. For those of you who are listening, if you're finding some value in this, please continue to share and also review. That's how we're able to reach other people and continue to spread the word here. So thank you. Today we have someone from New Zealand, all the way across the world, reached out to us. We got Terry on with us today. Terry, really glad to have you. Thank you for being with us.
Good to be here.
Yeah,
Terry, before we go, I got to say, I think all Americans have this fantasy a little bit of moving to New Zealand for a while. So it's just like this wonderland over there that's beautiful and amazing. Is that true?
Yeah, it's one big hobbit village.
Yeah, really? Yeah.
And the fish are a lot bigger too. As a fly fisherman, it's been my dream to get over there. So I'm gonna get over there at some point. So I'm one of those Americans, Brandon, that dreams of going there.
And so am I.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, Terry, why don't you just kind of give us a little bit of background behind your question, and then let's get to your question. Let's have a little bit of a discussion today.
Sounds good. Okay, so I've been on a recovery journey for about 18 months. And prior to that, living an indulgent life, involved in all sorts of things. And when everything came to the crunch, I ended up doing a session with Brandon, and I was told to ask one question from my wife, and that was, have I ever loved her? Now, Brandon gave me an answer, and then it came from a conversation the other day, and it wasn't quite clear of, or I couldn't retell it properly. But then over my recovery time, I've read Wild at Heart and The Boundaries by Henry Cloud. And the impression I had was, if you don't have boundaries, you are unable to love yourself. And if you're unable to love yourself, you are unable to love anyone else, which is why someone living in addiction or indulgence or non-wholeheartedness, they cannot quite connect with God because they are unable to understand the love God could have for them, because they don't have those boundaries, or they don't have that relationship or that level of self-worth. If I remember your answer correctly back in that time, it was, if there was a time I hadn't acted selfishly, then that would be a time that I acted in love.
Okay.
So, but I wasn't a boundary person. So I want to understand that.
So, okay. Wow, this is a great question, because there's so many kind of directions we could go with it.
Yeah.
First off, I think we have to come to a common understanding of what is love. Now, that sounds like an 80s love song.
It is an 80s love song.
but we need to understand what is love. How are we defining love? And I think love is kind of thrown out there all the time as just this thing that we all want and we all desire. But what really is that when you're in a relationship? I think one of the major elements to love is selflessness. So it's service. It's really allowing the other person to be them. It's not inserting yourself. It's not getting defensive. And so it's kind of tricky, because I think selflessness is different than self-sacrifice. Selflessness is different than not having a truth or not showing up with a backbone, and not being willing to be you. Selflessness is actually being willing to be you, but it's also allowing them to be them at the same time. So to answer your question, Terry, I think it is kind of a combination. Is yes, to love somebody requires selflessness, and to fully have intimacy, to get to the deepest levels of love, I believe, in fact, I know that requires boundaries, and it requires authenticity in that relationship. So yes, you can love somebody through being selfless, but you can really experience love through being authentic. Any other thoughts, guys?
Yeah, Brandon, as you're talking, I kind of wonder, Terry, I imagine that this conversation has come up in the process of what you said has been your 18 months of recovery, maybe more than once. And it's probably come up inside of yourself, and it's probably come from your wife as well. And this is an interesting question, because maybe the answer isn't a straight up yes or no. Maybe there were times when you were in a place where you were able to be selfless. You were maybe outside of that indulgence, that selfishness, where you could act in love and be in love. And maybe there were times when you honestly weren't. And maybe there were elements of love without what we call consummate love. So something that we talk about all the time in like my men's groups is what love really is. And we talk about the triangular theory of love. And the triangular theory of love spells out 3 different kinds of love, that in order to be fully consummate in my love with somebody or for somebody, I need to possess all 3 of the kind of elements of love. And the first one is called passion. And that's where you get Twitter-pated. That's where you sort of like fall head over heels for somebody. And that's where you like every single chick flick you've ever watched is passionate love, right? And then there's intimacy. And intimacy in this theory isn't about sex. It's about knowing. It's about developing this complete idea and understanding, and this constant pursuit of knowing the person that I'm in a relationship with and seeking to know them. And that intimacy grows. And that's where, your friendship starts to develop. And that's where you get that deeper sense of closeness with somebody. And then you have the loyalty or the commitment part of love, which is where I'm not giving up on you. I'm here all the way. I will be here. I'm a safe place to land. Right. And so if you look at it from the context of those 3 pillars of love, there may have been elements of love at certain times in your relationship without having the consummate love that comes with all 3. So when you have like a betrayal, that feeling of loyalty and commitment gets put on the ropes. It gets strained. And the beautiful thing about recovery work is that if people will dive into doing their work and doing their healing, what was a weakness where there wasn't loyalty and commitment becomes a strong pillar in their relationship, and it develops and forges that deeper connection. Well, if commitment stays, but you don't continue to develop the intimacy and closeness with somebody, or you don't strive to keep passion alive in the marriage, then you've got an empty marriage, and you end up living for 50 years with the spouse as a roommate. And you could call that committed love, but it wouldn't be consummate love. So does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I get it.
I love that, Tyler. I'm
glad we agree this week, Brandon.
Well, let's wait and see if anything else comes up. Love exists on a continuum. It's not so black and white. It's not I love you, I don't love you. There's a continuum there, And so that's why I think it's hard to really define or say, yes, you absolutely are showing love or not. Terry, can I ask you, do you love your wife?
Yes.
Okay. No hesitation. Yes. Would your wife say that you love her? What do you think?
I would think so.
Okay. And why? Why?
Oh, um, I'm not sure. I don't want to put it down to what I do. I know in a previous life that's what I did. Um,
Okay.
I found self-validation through being aware of what needed to be done and doing it.
So you tried to earn your love.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or at least earn that she feels like you love her, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. In the thick of things, when it was really bad, when there was a lot of deceit and denial going on, do you think your wife would say that you loved her?
No.
No. So why? What's the difference now compared to then?
I think there was a lack of trust, and she didn't know who or what I was.
Okay.
Like even if everything was on the table, it was a case of getting to know who I am.
Terry, that's the perfect answer. So think about it. In order for her to actually be connected to you, to feel love, she needs to know who you actually are. In order for you to actually be who you are, you need to be a vulnerable man who has integrity, who shows up honestly in that relationship. So I would imagine when you were struggling with your indulgent behaviors, if I would have asked you, hey, do you love your wife? You probably would have said, yeah, I do, right? But she's not feeling love in that relationship because there's not a foundation there, a foundation of trust, which is built on transparency and openness in that relationship. And so coming back to your original question, you need to love yourself in order to love others or be connected to others. Is absolutely true. In order to be an open, authentic, vulnerable man in a relationship, it takes some self-compassion, self-forgiveness, self-confidence, and self-love, right? And so to go from wallowing in the faulty core beliefs and the shame, what the addiction has taught you, to self-compassion and self-confidence, there's a threshold that you have to cross. And that threshold takes courage. And that courage is, I think that I'm unlovable, but I'm gonna see if I am. And I'm gonna show up honest and transparent. And I love what you're saying about your relationship, Terry, because you're seeing the fruits of that. You're seeing the difference between when you were trying to do both things. You were trying to feed the indulgent behaviors and keep your wife around and make her feel like she's loved. Now it's, no, I'm gonna choose into this relationship fully and be more open and authentic in it. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
like when you're saying this, sorry, Tyler.
Go ahead, Terry.
Like previously, before all the cards were on the table, I would do an awful lot of housework. And actually, the first Betrayed Addicted podcast I listened to was What Are Their Intentions, which is the one where you guys discuss all the housework that gets done and the cleaning the toilets and things. I've done far less housework in the last 18 months.
Yeah.
Just thinking about that.
You're more authentic.
Yeah.
That's what's happening.
It's not that I don't like housework. It's just
no. It's not that you're a lazy husband or anything like that.
It's that you're not overperforming your way into trying to convince your wife that you're lovable, which is the difference now between then and now, right? It's like back then you would pursue her needing to show that she loved you, not for her, but for you. because of the fear of needing that you were going to lose her, or that you were unlovable, or that you weren't enough.
Yeah.
And so
that's some selfish housework.
exactly. It's like, that's why when a partner asks the question, like if your wife were to ask that question early in recovery, she would say, absolutely, he doesn't love me, because it's a selfish form of love. It's the kind of thing where, yeah, he's doing things, he's engaging in things. And if you ask the husband, he's going to say, absolutely, I love my wife. But he's coming at it from a place of, love means I don't want to lose her, and I can't show up real, I can't show up authentically. And as a result, she doesn't feel any of that love. And he goes on in this place going, well, I love her. Yeah, well, he loves her in the same way that he loves consuming anything else.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. On the back end of that, if you'll know that's happening, if on the back end of that there's resentment, when you go and you do seemingly loving things to try to consume somebody, you have an agenda. And so when you're doing the dishes or vacuuming or cleaning the house, and she doesn't come home and give you a big hug, or she doesn't have sex with you that night, then it's like, what the heck? Like, I did these things. Can't you see me? When you do something because you love somebody, there's no agenda. There's no waiting for that validation. It's just, I love you. And so I'm just doing this thing because I love you. And it ends there, right? So
I want to ask another question to you, Terry. Is it possible that you could actually be loving your wife and have her be mad at you as a result of something you're doing?
Yes. I think so. Because it's a tough question, Tyler. I didn't study for that one. I would think so, because if you're acting in authenticity and you're doing it selflessly, it doesn't necessarily mean you're both on the same page.
Right. Could I give you an example of that? This is kind of a personal example. Thank goodness I've got a good wife who's willing to let me talk a little bit. In the past, I relate to what your question was, Terry. In the past, I used to be this one who needed to perform to make sure my wife was always okay, so that I was enough, so that she loved me. And then things started to shift, and I realized that a lot of times I'm getting in the way of my wife's growth because I'm willing to step into places where she has work to do, and I'll take the responsibility for it and try to take it away or try to fix it for my gain, because I don't want her upset with me. And real love is the ability to go into that same situation and hold the space that I need to hold, to say, hey, babe, I see that you're struggling with X, Y, and Z. I see that that's really rough on you. I can imagine how that must feel. And I can't hold it. Like, it's not mine. Like, this is something that you're going to have to figure out, and I'm here to walk with you through it. But, and what happens? If she's used to you always being there to take responsibility, she's going to want to jump in and be angry and frustrated with you. But at the same time, she's also going to learn and realize, wow, like, my husband isn't telling me I'm bad. He's there for me. He loves me. But I am on the hook to figure some of this stuff out for myself, because he ultimately can't fix it. Right?
Yeah. I guess that's true. I think a lot of guys could relate with trying to be the fixer.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the temptation on that front is to remove yourself from the pain, because when there's a problem, if you can fix the problem, there's no problem anymore. Whereas, and I think if you do that to somebody, no matter how well you fix the problem, they still feel cheated. Like, unless a person is actually properly validated in their problem, no one feels that the solution is actually solving anything. So yeah, I can see where you're coming from. That holding space shows that you're actually valuing the person as who they are, where they're at, as opposed to saying, almost dismissing them by solving the problem.
Right. Go ahead, Brennan.
Well, I was just going to say, guys, make no mistake about it. it is healthy for your relationship to piss your wife off sometimes. Now, I'll say it that bluntly. Now you don't deliberately go and do that. You don't go out of your way to try to do that. But I'll say that one more time. It is healthy for your relationship to piss your wife off sometimes. And let me explain. It's what Tyler was saying here. It goes deeper than just boundaries and authenticity. Me and my wife are very different. And if I become her to please her, then I'm sacrificing safety in the relationship. I'm sacrificing trust in the relationship, and I'm also sacrificing the polarity between the masculine and the feminine. So which will ultimately destroy passion in that relationship. And so when I a woman, femininity wants to find masculinity that's grounded and confident and knows who he is. Okay, not a pompous jerk, but somebody who's grounded. And so if my wife comes to me with something that's not my truth, but it is her truth, it's good for me to be able to stand strong and really check out my gut, my intuition, and stand strong in my truth, even if it differs from hers. And in those interactions, I might feel friction. There might be conflict. There might be a little bit of discord as we talk through those things. But the long-term effect of that is that she feels safe with me because she knows that I'll be honest with her about who I am and how I feel.
That's
right?
yeah. And Brandon, the challenge to that is that you've got to have in this situation, this example that you're giving, is that you have to have a man who knows who he is and knows his values. And that's part of the problem in a lot of relationships, is that you in this case, this scenario we're talking about, this man doesn't know, so then he tries to quote stand up for his truths, but he hasn't even grounded himself in the truth yet.
Yes.
And so you got to make sure that you're grounded in the truth and knowing, okay, these are these things. Like, and I'll give a really stupid example of this. It's like one of the constant things that we go around almost every year is that I like to hunt. And when the hunting season rolls around in October,
you're a horrible shot, by the way.
Oh, I'm terrible. But I'm getting better. Right? I'm learning to grow, and like I'm a terrible shot. But it's fun to get out and go. It's the best. It's ideal for both worlds because I can go out and feel like I'm getting this wild part of me going, and I can feel like I'm a man. And then I never hit the animal, so then I don't have to worry about all the cleanup. I don't have to worry about my wife being angry. But my wife vehemently disagrees with what I'm doing when I go hunting. She does not like me hunting. She doesn't like the idea of me killing something. I like the idea of the pursuit. I like the idea of providing for my family, everything that brings life to me in my manhood. Every single year, we have a discussion that goes something like, Tyler, you're not really going to go do that this year, are you? And I have to say, you know what? I realize that you have a different opinion, and I get that. Like, where you're coming from is valid. And I'm going hunting. Right. And then she's mad for a couple of days, usually about the same amount of time that I'm gone. And then when I get home, it's okay. We're back together. We're back to normal. But it's standing in the principle that for me, that does feel truthful. Like that's one of the ways that I connect to my masculinity. And I'm able to come back, at least I believe I'm able to come back from a trip like that, having been with you and with the other men that we go with. And I feel buoyed up. I feel back in touch with my masculine heart. Right. And I'm able to show up with that energy for her and for my girls that I otherwise wouldn't be able to do if I didn't go and pursue those things. And right. I think she sees the value in it, even though she hates the way I get to it.
Right. Yes. But I think what creates the safety there is that you're able to say, I love you and I'm going to do this anyways, because I know myself. And I think when you peel out of the driveway, she might be feeling a little bit uncomfortable and angry at you, but long term, she probably likes that you're going to follow your truth anyways, right? So, Terry, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
With betrayal trauma and addiction and things like that, oftentimes there's systems that get set up between a couple of like checking in. And this comes back to what we're talking about here, where sometimes those check-ins are very unhealthy. They end up with her really being stuck in this cycle of fear, wanting to know everything, every trigger, every last thing that you've done, and him showing up with his tail between his legs, trying to appease her, trying to say the right things, and creating more unsafety. Just curious for you guys, have you ever had anything like this set up where you have to check in, and how does that go?
We haven't really had that system of checking in.
Good.
There's been the occasional time where you might get a really blunt question. What's up? Where are you at? You know?
Okay.
Or questioning a particular context or scenario. You're really reactive then. What's going on?
Right.
Where's your head at?
Which sounds healthy to me.
Yes.
Hey, I want to check in with you. I'm reflecting something back. And you're okay with her doing that with you, Terry?
Yeah.
Checking in with you that way? Yeah. That's good stuff. The reason I bring this up is a lot of times a man who starts in recovery trying to rebuild trust after he's broken trust in a relationship thinks that he needs to go into this compliance mode in order to rebuild that trust. And so these check-ins get set up, and that compliance does not build trust. I had a couple I was working with where he had to check his phone in with her twice a day. She checked his internet history like a few times a week. She could even reach over and grab him to see if he was aroused at any moment of the day. That's the system that they had set up. And I'm talking to this guy and I'm saying, look, the problem is you're not an honest man with her. You're not creating safety with her. And he looked at me and he's like, what do you mean I'm not honest? I'm willing to do this. And he's telling me how honest he is in complete resentment toward her. Like I can totally feel from him, like I hate her. And what was happening wasn't working for him. So instead of just going along, he needed to actually piss his wife off a little bit. Take a step back and say, look, this is what will work for me. And I got to have some boundaries with you here. And she might leave him. She might say, I can't handle that, and leave him. But that's
which would be her
better
boundaries.
Which would be her boundary. But that's still better for him to show up real than to fake it and try to comply and think that that's actually loving her, because that's not loving her, right? Tyler, I'm sure you do this all the time. Go ahead, Terry.
So the thing is, I'm listening to you guys, and I agree. But early recovery work, the person in recovery just doesn't see things for how they really are.
Yeah.
Like they're not looking out of their head right. And when they're like, I can get it, their wife might be acting out in fear and wanting to control things. But often the indulgent person is acting like a complete muppet, as we'd say over here.
Muppet, I like that.
and has no idea what reality looks like.
You're absolutely right. So it is important, but when you go to have boundaries with your partner, that those boundaries are real truths of yours, that you're not using that as a means of denial and diversion and disconnection. So for him to say that doesn't work for me because it's not healthy, it doesn't feel right to me, that's one thing. For him to say that doesn't work for me because, oh, by the way, I want to hide a bunch of stuff from you and get away with a bunch of stuff. And this is where a group and a good therapist can really help, is for you to take it to them. You know, you ask Tyler, you ask your group, and you say, guys, like, this isn't feeling right between me and my wife. And this is what I feel like my truth is. And they might kick your butt and say, like, you are so justifying and in denial and all this stuff, right? Or they might totally back you up and say, it feels like you're coming from a real genuine place of integrity. and it's good for you to step into that. But you're right, Terry. When you're in the early stages of overcoming addiction, there's a lot of denial there, right, Tyler?
Right. Yeah. And I was just going to add, kind of coming back full circle to where we started this conversation a little bit, is you're right, Terry. Like in the beginning, most people have such a dark shroud over their eyes that if they hear, it's like if they hear their therapist say what Brandon just said, they use that and go, yes, I can go stick it to my partner now. Like I can stand in my truth and I can be justified and I can be right. But what's missing is what Brandon started with early on in our conversation, which is authenticity and integrity in sticking to what true values are. So in the example Brandon just gave, if the man is coming into the relationship with a sincere desire to rebuild trust, he's also going to be coming at it, if he's living with inside himself, with a willingness to provide whatever safety he can for his wife. So he's going to come in and say, I'm willing to do, I'm willing to let you see my phone if you want to see it. And I don't think that's going to be healthy, right? But it's that willingness, because the heart is now saying, this is who I am, or early recovery, you're walking down the street and she sees a woman and you see a woman and she goes, hey, did you see that woman? Like, was she pretty? And you go, well, what woman? Like that, no integrity, right? What if you create some space for her and yourself and actually build trust by being able to say, yeah, I noticed her. She was pretty. And I'm going to do my work. I'm choosing you. I'm doing the 3-second rule. I'm choosing to grow into our relationship. So now it's a both and, where I can honestly do my work, and I'm the one choosing to do my work because I want to rebuild trust and because I love my partner. But that comes with that vulnerability and authenticity and being real. And that's where denial gets in the way, as it prevents you from being real. It keeps you in falseness. So any other thoughts, Terry? Questions?
Oh, yeah, no, I'm just thinking about it. We've gone through the recovery side of it, loving in early recovery and pissing our wife off and justifying that.
Don't get off of here, Terry, and be like, I'm supposed to piss you off to your wife.
What you just said really concerns me. Pissing your wife off and justifying it. No. When I say, I really want to clarify, when I say pissing your wife off, what I mean is being willing to be separate from her. There's this paradoxical nature of love, which is when I'm willing to be separate, when I'm willing to be me, then I can passionately love you and connect to you so deeply.
Because I can give.
Yes, because I am me. I have my energy to give now.
Yes.
So that's what I mean by that.
Yeah. See, you're saying that you're your own man, and
yes.
Yeah, you have your own person, and that's the boundaries thing. That's your little fence around yourself, and
absolutely.
Yeah, you can give up yourself, and that, I think for me, knowing that I had that gauge, if I started to feel resentment, I had to check myself. Like, where's my boundary now? And
that's a great gauge.
A little bit, yep. Yeah. And as soon as you feel a little bit, you go, hang on. If I'm doing whatever I'm doing now, and I'm starting to feel resentful, I need to make a decision of where I'm at in this.
Yes. You know what I say a lot, Terry, is that this whole the whole issue of broken trust and the relationship problems is not actually about the relationship. And so when you have resentment, it's not actually about your wife and it's not about your relationship. It's about you. And if you and your wife were let's say you were perfectly healthy, right? Which none of us are. But if you were perfectly healthy, then you would both really know your truths, and you would be very, very healthy on an individual level. And after that, the triangular love that Tyler just talked about, that comes easy. It comes naturally and automatic once you truly do love yourself and know yourself.
Great thought, Brandon. Go ahead, Terry. Any last thoughts or questions that you're having?
Well, yeah, I don't know if actually, how do I look back then, pre-recovery, and go, because I think we've answered the question. They said, look, yeah, you can, but it's going to be very superficial. It's going to be very shallow, because that sort of love triangular theory of
Okay.
love,
Yes.
it'll be very shallow because you're not working with the whole triangle, but it's there.
Yes. Yes, and Terry, so, and what I would say is that think of it on a sliding scale too. So there were probably moments when you were maybe doing better with yourself than not throughout the whole course of your marriage, where you were probably more capable of loving her on a higher level, even though it was still probably limited. And there were other times when you thought you were loving her and you were barely holding on to a shred of that love. And it probably wasn't an all or nothing. It was a moment to moment kind of place in your life where you may have been living with more integrity at certain times than others, and you may have been more in touch with who you are at certain times than others. And so when a guy says, well, I never loved my wife, then it's like, well, yes, you did, and you thought you loved her in great depth, and at times you may have loved her more than other times based off of your ability to be real and authentic. And the deeper you get into this process, you're going to realize that what you thought was love was a tiny little sliver and shred of it, and that it's so much more than that. And that's the beauty of like what we get with our clients. When I know Brandon probably has this happen all the time too, but I'll run into a client 5, 6, 7 years after I met with them, and I'll say, how you doing? They're doing great, and they're fully in love, and they'll say, I never ever ever want to go through this again, but I'm so glad I did, because I learned what love really was. And I would never have been able to understand that without having to go through this and realize that I was blind to what it actually was. So, Terry, man, it's been really good to have you on. Last thought or comment today?
Nah, just lots to think about.
He just wants to go to bed.
Yeah, he needs to get back. He needs to get back to that. Yeah, well, we really. Go ahead, Brandon.
Sorry, Tyler. I know we're wrapping up, but I want to make one last point, and it's this. Oftentimes, when we don't love ourselves, we don't even realize that we don't love ourselves. The trauma started at such a young age, and the shame started at such a young age, that we start to develop these stories. We start to develop these faulty core beliefs. And we start to develop these identities that become so ingrained and so automatic that it creates this thing that just produces shame over and over and over again. And once that shame gets produced, it oftentimes turns into addiction. It turns into depression. You start to see the symptoms of it. And that's usually when somebody breaks, and they break to the point where they're like, okay, I've got to figure out how to let this stuff go. I got to figure out who I really am. And what I want to say is that it is amazing to me, having done a lot of EMDR, facilitated a lot of EMDR, as confusing and distorted the stories and the shame and the faulty core beliefs can be, and how tricky they can be. We have a natural ability within us as human beings to tap into our soul and to connect to God and to recognize who we really are. It just takes surrender. It takes opening up and allowing God to initiate us and to love us again, so that we can feel again who we really truly are. And that's where the healing takes place. And so once you go through that initiation process, then you're available for intimacy. You're available for connection to another person.
Thank you, Brandon. That could almost be a tease for another podcast to go dig into that a little bit more. And Terry, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate your questions. I know that this topic is something that a lot of our listeners are also thinking about and have pressing on their hearts and their minds. To those of you guys listening, thank you so much for being with us. If you have questions, please go to thetherapybrothers.com. You can submit a question in writing, or
any question
you want, and also you can submit a request to come on the show if you'd like to. So
you guys, we talk about betrayal, addiction a lot, but we will cover anything. So any question you have, go to therapybrothers.com.
Thank you, guys. Until next time.